The small, folded piece of paper felt heavier than lead in my palm, burning against my skin as I kept my hand concealed beneath the white tablecloth. The restaurant was alive with the clinking of silverware and the hum of polite conversation. But for me, the world had gone completely silent. I stared at the young waitress walking away, her ponytail swinging with a deceptive innocence, but her eyes had burned with a terrifying urgency just seconds before. I looked down at my lap and slowly, carefully, unfolded the note again, praying I had misread it. The messy, hastily scrawled letters were undeniable. "Don't drink that, trust me." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked up at the people sitting across from me. My son, Daniel, was laughing at something his wife had just said, his face open and trusting. The face of the boy I had raised with every ounce of love I possessed. And beside him sat Harper, my daughter-in-law. She was smiling, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped elegantly around the stem of her wine glass. It was a smile I had seen 1,000 times, pristine and polished, but now, under the dim amber lighting of the gilded olive, it looked like the grin of a predator. 5 minutes. That was all it took for my entire reality to shatter and rearrange itself into a nightmare. My name is Evelyn Vance. I turned 65 today. Most people view their 65th birthday as a milestone of aging, a step toward the twilight years. I never imagined it would be the day I had to choose between my life and my innocence, the day I would look into the eyes of family and see a murderer staring back. It was a rainy Saturday evening in Seattle. The weather was typical for November, a relentless drizzle that blurred the city lights into streaks of neon against the gray sky. Daniel had insisted on taking me to the Gilded Olive, a high-end Mediterranean restaurant downtown that smelled of roasted garlic, rosemary, and expensive perfume. He wanted to make tonight special. He knew I had been having a hard time lately. Over the past 6 months, I had been plagued by dizzy spells, brain fog, and a fatigue so deep it felt like my bones were made of iron. I felt myself fading, and tonight was supposed to be a reprieve, a celebration of the fact that I was still here. "You look beautiful tonight, Mom," Daniel said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. His grip was warm and solid, the only anchor I had in a world that lately felt like it was slipping away. "I really love that shade of blue on you. It brings out your eyes." "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile. I felt frail. I felt like a ghost in my own clothes, but I didn't want to ruin the mood. Daniel worried so much. He had those deep worry lines etched between his brows, lines that shouldn't be there at 32. Harper chimed in, her voice smooth as silk. "Yes, Evelyn, you really do look much more rested than you did last week. I'm so glad the supplements I brought over are finally helping. You seem more present." I looked at Harper. She was a stunning woman, tall and blonde with ice blue eyes that always seemed to be assessing, calculating. She worked as a high-level administrator for a network of luxury-assisted living facilities. She was efficient, sharp, and immaculately put together. I had always tried to love her because Daniel loved her. I tried to ignore the coldness that radiated off her when Daniel wasn't looking, the subtle digs about my memory, the way she would talk over me as if I weren't in the room. "I suppose I am having a good day," I said softly. We ordered our meals. I chose the lamb chops, my favorite. Daniel ordered the sea base, and Harper, always watching her caloric intake, ordered a complex salad with dressing on the side. Then came the wine. Daniel had ordered a bottle of vintage Merlot, knowing red wine was my indulgence. The waiter poured the dark, ruby liquid into our glasses. The aroma of blackberries and oak wafted up to me, usually a scent that brought me comfort. "Here's to you, Mom," Daniel said, raising his glass. "To 65 years of resilience, grace, and love. You are the bedrock of this family. I don't know where I'd be without you." Harper raised her glass too. "To Evelyn, a wonderful mother-in-law and a fighter. We just want you to be happy and healthy." Her eyes locked onto mine as she said the word healthy. There was a glint there, something hard and unyielding. We clinked glasses. The crystal rang out with a clear, bell-like sound. I brought the glass toward my lips, anticipating the rich taste, ready to let the warmth of the alcohol soothe my frayed nerves. That was when the waitress had appeared. She was young, perhaps 22, with dark curly hair and a name tag that read Mia. She had approached with a pitcher of water to refill our glasses, but her movements were jerky, nervous. As she leaned in to wipe a non-existent crumb from near my plate, her hand brushed mine. It was a lightning-fast motion, a sleight of hand that a magician would envy. The note slid under my napkin. She made eye contact with me for a fraction of a second, a pleading, terrified look, and whispered so softly that only I could hear, "Read it." Now the glass hovered inches from my mouth. The note was in my lap. "Don't drink that." My throat went dry. Panic, cold and prickly, washed over my skin. I looked at the wine. It looked perfectly normal, dark, swirling, inviting. But the waitress's eyes haunted me. Why would a stranger risk her job to pass me a note like that? Unless she saw something. Unless she knew something. I lowered the glass. "Mom?" Daniel asked, pausing with his own glass halfway to his mouth. "Is everything okay?" I just need a moment," I stammered, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. I felt a sudden wave of nausea, but it wasn't physical. It was the sickness of suspicion. "Excuse me, I need to visit the ladies' room before we start." "Of course," Harper said, her smile not faltering, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you need help, Evelyn? You've been a bit unsteady on your feet lately." "No," I said, perhaps too sharply. I stood up, my legs trembling. "I can manage, thank you." I walked toward the back of the restaurant, clutching the paper in my pocket. The corridor to the restrooms was dimly lit. Once inside the safety of the bathroom, I locked the stall door and leaned against it, gasping for air. I pulled the note out again. The handwriting was rushed, the pen pressure heavy. "Don't drink that. Your life is in danger. Trust me." I stared at the words until they blurred. My mind raced back through the last few months, the sudden onset of my illness. The doctors who couldn't find anything wrong with my heart or my brain, despite my constant confusion and palpitations. They had chalked it up to age, to stress, perhaps early onset dementia. Harper had been the one to suggest dementia first. She'd been so supportive, attending every appointment, taking notes, nodding gravely when I stumbled over my words. Harper brought me tea every Sunday. Harper organized my pillbox because my hands were getting shaky. Harper suggested I might be safer in one of her facilities. A chill went down my spine, so violent it made my teeth chatter. Was it possible? Was the woman my son slept next to every night trying to kill me? I couldn't stay in the bathroom forever. I had to go back. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the terror. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked frightened. Yes, but she also looked angry. For the first time in months, the fog in my brain seemed to clear, burned away by the adrenaline of survival. I walked back to the table. Daniel and Harper were talking in low tones. When I approached, they stopped. "Everything all right, Mom?" Daniel asked, half rising from his chair. I sat down, fighting the urge to run. "Yes, just a little dizziness." It passed. Harper watched me. Her gaze was predatory, fixated on my wine glass. "You should drink your wine, Evelyn," she said soothingly. "It's a Merlot, full of antioxidants. It might help your blood pressure." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the tension in her jaw. I saw the way her fingers drummed on the tablecloth. She was waiting. She was impatient. I looked at Daniel. He was cutting a piece of bread, completely oblivious. He trusted her. He loved her. If I accused her now, based on a note from a waitress, he would think I was finally losing my mind completely. That was the narrative Harper had built, wasn't it? Evelyn is confused. Evelyn is paranoid. Evelyn is losing her grip. I needed proof, and I needed to save myself. A plan formed in my mind, desperate and reckless. I needed a distraction. "Oh my," I said, looking toward the entrance. Is that your boss, Daniel?" Daniel turned around instantly, his back to the table. "Where?" Harper turned too, her instinct to social climb overriding her focus on me for a split second. "Mr. Henderson? Here?" In that singular second of averted attention, I moved with a speed I hadn't possessed in years. My hand shot out. I grabbed my glass and swapped it with Harper's. They were identical glasses, filled to the exact same level with the same dark red wine. I pulled my hand back just as they turned back around. "I don't see him, Mom," Daniel said, turning back to me. "My mistake," I said, my heart thundering so loud I thought they could hear it. It must have been someone who looked like him. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Harper looked annoyed, but she didn't suspect. Why would she? To her, I was a frail, confused old woman. She didn't think I had the mental capacity for subterfuge. She reached for the glass in front of her, the glass that had been in front of me 5 seconds ago. "Well, let's not let the toast go to waste," Harper said, lifting the glass. "To family." "To family," I echoed, my voice steely. I watched her. I watched the glass touch her lips. I watched her tilt her head back. I watched her swallow the liquid that was meant to stop my heart. I took a sip of my wine, her wine. It tasted like Merlot, just grapes and oak. We began to eat. I forced myself to cut my lamb, to chew, to swallow, though my stomach was in knots. I watched Harper like a hawk. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. She ate her salad. She chatted about her upcoming project at work, a new wing opening at the assisted living center in Bellevue. She laughed at Daniel's jokes. Was the waitress wrong? Was this all a paranoia-induced hallucination? Then it started. It was subtle at first. Harper paused in the middle of a sentence, her brow furrowing. She touched her chest lightly with her fingertips. She cleared her throat. "Are you okay, honey?" Daniel asked, looking up from his sea base. Harper blinked, looking confused. I feel a bit warm. Is it hot in here?" "It's actually quite chilly," Daniel said. Harper took a sip of water. Her hand shook. Just a slight tremor, but I saw it. The color began to drain from her face, leaving her skin a waxy gray tone. She dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china plate. "Harper?" Daniel's voice rose an octave. "I don't feel right," Harper gasped. Her breathing was becoming ragged. "I feel dizzy. My heart." She clutched the table edge, her knuckles turning white. Sweat beaded on her forehead instantly, dampening her hairline. Her eyes darted around the room, wide and terrified. She looked at me, and for a second, realization dawned in her eyes. She looked at her glass, then at mine. The horror on her face wasn't just pain, it was the shock of the hunter stepping into her own trap. She tried to stand up. I need a doctor," she wheezed. She never made it to her feet. Her legs buckled and she collapsed sideways out of the chair, crashing onto the floor. "Harper!" Daniel screamed, leaping from his seat. He fell to his knees beside her. "Someone call 911! Help! My wife is collapsing!" The restaurant erupted into chaos. Diners stood up, gasping. Waiters rushed over. I sat frozen in my chair, looking down at the woman who had tried to murder me. She was convulsing slightly, her eyes rolling back in her head. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mia, the waitress. She looked pale, terrified, but she nodded at me. "You're safe," she whispered. The next hour was a blur of flashing red lights and the squawk of radios. The paramedics swarmed the restaurant, working efficiently to stabilize Harper. They loaded her onto a stretcher, her face now an ashen mask, an oxygen mask strapped over her mouth. "Mom, come with us!" Daniel cried, his face streaked with tears. He was in a panic, completely unmoored. I got into the back of the ambulance, sitting on the bench seat while Daniel held Harper's limp hand. I looked at my son's devastated face and felt a surge of guilt so powerful it almost choked me. I had done this. I had switched the glasses, but then I touched the paper in my pocket, the note that had saved me, and the guilt hardened into resolve. If I hadn't done it, I would be the one on that stretcher, or worse, I would be dead, and Harper would be playing the grieving daughter-in-law comforting my son while counting my money. At the hospital, the waiting room was cold and smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Daniel paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair. "I don't understand," he kept muttering. "She was fine. She barely drank anything. It must be an allergic reaction. Maybe it was the nuts in the salad dressing." I sat quietly, my hands clasped in my lap. I couldn't tell him yet, not until I knew for sure. After an agonizing 2 hours, a doctor emerged. He looked grim. He walked over to us, checking his clipboard. "Family of Harper Vance?" "Yes, that's us," Daniel said, rushing forward. "Is she okay? What happened?" "She's stable, but she's in a coma," the doctor said gravely. "We've pumped her stomach and administered antidotes, but it was touch and go." "What was it?" Daniel asked. "Food poisoning?" The doctor shook his head. "Mr. Vance, we found high concentrations of digoxin in your wife's system, along with alcohol, which potentiates the effect. Digoxin is a heart medication. Does your wife have a heart condition? Does she take this medication?" "No," Daniel said, bewildered. "Harper is healthy as a horse. She runs marathons. Why would she have heart medicine in her system?" The doctor exchanged a look with a police officer who had just walked up behind him. "That's what we need to find out," the officer said. "I'm Detective Miller. Given the levels we found, this wasn't an accidental ingestion. This looks like poisoning." "Poisoning?" Daniel staggered back as if slapped. "That's insane. Who would poison Harper?" I stood up. My legs were steady now. "She wasn't the intended target, Daniel," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the air like a knife. Daniel turned to me, eyes wide. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled note. I handed it to the detective. "The waitress at the restaurant gave me this just before we toasted," I said. "Harper didn't see her do it. It says, 'Don't drink that.'" The detective took the note, reading it carefully. He looked at me with intense interest. "And you didn't drink it?" I switched the glasses, I confessed, when they were distracted. I switched my wine with Harper's. Silence descended on the small group. The hum of the vending machine in the corner seemed deafening. Daniel looked from me to the note and then to the floor, his brain trying to process the impossible. You gave her the poison?" Daniel whispered. "She put it in my glass, Daniel." I cried, my composure cracking. "She's been poisoning me for months. The dizziness, the brain fog, the weakness. It wasn't dementia. It was her. She was trying to kill me." "No." Daniel shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "That's not possible. Harper loves you. She's been taking care of you. She's been managing my decline," I corrected him. "Think about it, Daniel. Every time I felt sick, who prepared the food? Who brought the tea? Who sorted the pills?" The detective stepped in. "Mrs. Vance, I need you to come with me. We need to get a statement, and we need to find that waitress." The investigation that followed over the next 48 hours unspooled a reality so dark it made me question everything I thought I knew about human nature. The waitress, Mia Torres, came into the station voluntarily. She was a criminology student who worked nights to pay for school, but her connection to Harper wasn't random. I sat in an interview room with Detective Miller and Daniel when Mia walked in. She looked tired, but her chin was held high. "Tell us how you knew," Detective Miller asked. Mia looked at me, her eyes soft with sympathy. 2 years ago, my grandmother was in a facility called Pineview Estates. It's one of the places Harper manages. My grandmother was wealthy, but she had no close family nearby except me, and I was away at college. Harper took a special interest in her. Mia took a shaky breath. Harper started handling her affairs. She isolated her. My grandmother started having these episodes. Heart failure, they said. She died 3 months after Harper took over her care. I thought it was natural until I saw the autopsy report months later. It showed traces of digoxin, but it was ruled accidental overdose because elderly people get confused with meds. But my grandmother didn't take digoxin. I investigated, Mia continued. I tracked Harper. I changed my name and got a job at different places she frequented. I've been waiting for her to slip up. Tonight I saw her at the bar before she went to your table. I saw her slip a powder into the wine glass the bartender had set aside for the older woman at table 4. I knew she was doing it again. Daniel sat with his head in his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. The betrayal was breaking him apart piece by piece. But why? Daniel choked out. We have money. We're happy. Why would she do this? Detective Miller placed a file on the table. We looked into your finances, Mr. Vance, or rather your wife's finances. She has a gambling debt, a massive one, online crypto gambling. She's in the hole for nearly $2 million. I gasped. $2 million? And, the detective continued, looking at me, we found a document on her laptop. It's a power of attorney draft and an amendment to your will, Mrs. Vance. It seems she was planning to have you declared incompetent due to dementia within the month. Once she had power of attorney, she could liquidate your assets, your house, your savings, your investments, to pay off her debts. Then, with you out of the way, she would inherit everything through Daniel, I finished. It was a perfect, monstrous plan. She would kill me slowly, making it look like natural decline, get control of my estate, and then finish the job with a heart attack induced by digoxin. Daniel would be the grieving son, and she would be the supportive wife who solved their financial ruin with my blood money. I looked at my son. He looked like a child who had just learned that monsters were real. I'm so sorry, Mom, he wept. I'm so sorry. I let her into our lives. I trusted her. I didn't protect you. I reached out and took his hands. They were cold. Daniel, listen to me. She fooled everyone. She's a professional predator. You didn't know. You couldn't have known. But I almost let you die, he whispered. But you didn't, I said firmly. And I'm still here. We are still here. Harper woke up 3 days later. She was handcuffed to the hospital bed. I went to see her. I needed to see her. Daniel couldn't bring himself to go. He was filing for divorce and annulment, scrubbing her from his life with a frantic desperation. When I walked into the hospital room, Harper looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a feral, trapped look. Her skin was sallow, and her lips were chapped. "Why did you come?" she rasped, her voice scratching like sandpaper. To gloat? I stood at the foot of the bed feeling a strange sense of calm. "No, Harper. I came to see if there was anything human left in you." She laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "Human? You rich old women are all the same. You sit on your piles of money, useless to society, while people like me have to scrap and claw for everything. You've lived your life. Why shouldn't I take what I need? So it was just a transaction to you?" I asked. "My life? Mia's grandmother's life? Just numbers on a balance sheet?" "It's survival of the fittest, Evelyn," she spat. "I was smarter than you. I just got unlucky with that waitress." "You weren't smarter," I said, leaning in. "You underestimated people. You underestimated Mia's love for her grandmother. You underestimated my will to live. And you underestimated Daniel's integrity. You thought everyone was as hollow as you." I turned to leave. "You'll rot, Evelyn!" she screamed after me, the monitor beeping frantically as her heart rate spiked. "You'll die alone and drooling in a home anyway." I didn't look back. I walked out of that room and closed the door on her forever. 6 months have passed since that night at the Gilded Olive. The rain has stopped in Seattle, replaced by the pale, tentative sunshine of early spring. My life looks very different now. I sold the big house. It had too many shadows. Too many memories of Harper bringing me poison tea. I bought a smaller place with a large garden in a quiet neighborhood. I spend my mornings gardening. I feel the damp earth between my fingers, smell the blooming lilacs, and listen to the birds. My health has returned with a vengeance. The brain fog is gone. My heart is strong. It turns out, when you stop ingesting poison, the body is remarkably resilient. Daniel is healing too. It's been harder for him. The trust issues run deep. He questions his own judgment constantly, but we are in therapy, both separately and together. We are rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of brutal honesty. He comes over every Sunday and we cook together, safe, simple meals that we prepare with our own hands. Mia comes over too. I helped pay for her final year of tuition. She's almost a licensed criminologist now. She calls me her honorary grandma, and I call her my guardian angel. We sit on my porch, drinking lemonade, always lemonade, never wine, and talk about the future. I think often about the lesson hidden in the horror of what happened. We live in a society that often dismisses the elderly. We are seen as fading, as burdens, as minds that are slowly turning off. Harper counted on that. She counted on the world ignoring me. She counted on my own son dismissing my symptoms as inevitable aging. But we are not invisible. We are not burdens. We are the keepers of history, the survivors of decades of storms. We have value. And more importantly, I learned to trust my gut, that deep primal instinct that whispered to me that something was wrong long before the note arrived. I had silenced that voice for the sake of family peace. I won't make that mistake again. Yesterday, I celebrated my 65-and-a-half birthday. It's not a real holiday, but Daniel insisted. We went to a park for a picnic. No fancy restaurants, just sandwiches and sunlight. As I watched my son laugh, a real laugh, free from the shadow of his wife, I took a deep breath of the crisp spring air. I am Evelyn Vance. I survived the woman who tried to erase me, and I intend to live every remaining second of my life with my eyes wide open. The world can be a dangerous place, full of wolves in sheep's clothing. But as long as we have people like Mia who are willing to speak up and the courage to listen to the warnings, we can survive. I raised my glass of lemonade to the sun. To life, I whispered. To a life that is truly mine.